Hello, hello. Is my voice audible? I hope my voice is audible, students. Just tell me in the comment section below. Okay. So let's start with another video of sociology, and my name is Shiny, your sociology educator from BEST. Today we are going to start a new chapter, a new topic which will be very important for from your board's perspective as well as for your CUET perspective. So today's topic is change and development in rural society. So we all know there are two kinds of societies, that is rural societies and urban societies, the city life and the village life. So how this rural people, how this rural society has changed over time, how colonial period has changed our society, our rural society from the pre-capitalist to a capitalist to an from colonial period to an independent Indian rural society. How this changed, how was this journey, and today we are going to start with that topic. So we are going to see how this change and development took place in our rural society from a sociological perspective. So let's start. So we will go through this chapter in a very brief manner. So first let us see the introduction. Indian society is primarily a rural society, though urbanization is growing. So our Indian society is 70% of our Indian society is rural in nature, right? 70% to 71% is rural, another 40% is urban, and it's growing day by day. It is developing day by day. People are migrating to cities, to urban areas in search of food, in search of new job opportunities, in search of education. So all these kind of things are going on in the society from a very past period of time. So now we can see that Indian society is primarily, in earlier times, Indian society was primarily a rural society, though urbanization is growing. The majority of India's people live in rural areas, 69%. So remember students, this might come for your 1 marks, for your 1 marks question. 69% according to 2011 census. Agricultural land is the most important productive resource. So we know that in rural areas, the agricultural land, the land where we do the agriculture, the cultivation, all these kind of things are going on in agricultural land, right? So agricultural land is very important for rural people. It is not just a means of production or a form of property. So it is not just a form of property for those people, right? For rural people, it's not just a property, it's a way of life. It's their way of life, right? Many of our cultural practices and patterns, the festivals that we generally enjoy in these urban areas as well as in the rural areas, it's a part of these agricultural societies only. Many of our practices and patterns belong to the agricultural scenario and can be traced to our agrarian background. So this was a brief introduction of the chapter, and this was a very brief introduction because this when this kind of agricultural land were in use, it was a very different kind of lifestyle. But after the colonialism started in India, the whole agricultural scenario changed drastically. And after independence, after we got our independence from the British colonial, Britishers, after that also our India took a very drastic turn of events. So in this chapter, we will go um, in a trajectory, how colonial period, what was the colonial period, how was our rural society in the colonial period, how it changed after our India got its independence. So it's in a bit of a trajectory line. So let's go to the next slide. So rural areas had a large number of other artisans like potters, carpenters, weavers, ironsmiths, and goldsmiths. So apart from the farming activities, there were many non-farm activities as well. The non-farm activities of rural areas included potters, carpenters, weavers, ironsmiths, and goldsmiths. Many people in rural areas have livelihoods based on rural non-farm activities. So these were the non-farm activities, and activities also included government services. These non-farm activities also included government services like postal and education department, factory workers or in the army. So these were the some of the non-farm activities that was going on in the rural areas apart from the agricultural practices. So this was how our rural agrarian background of Indian society was, right? So now let's go to the next slide. So students, I'm not going line by line in a very comprehensive manner. I'm just going, in a very brief manner so that you get a very comprehensive idea of the chapter that you are already studying in your class. So here we will just go, थोड़ा ऊपर से हम लोग देख लेंगे so that you understand what kind of questions that are being asked in your CUET examination as well as your board's examination. Right? So let's start now. So we will start with the agrarian structure. So since we are studying our rural society, so in the rural society there is also a structure. Like in the urban society there is a structure, in the city life there is a structure, as well as in the urban or rural areas there is a agrarian structure. Let me change the color of the pen. Okay. So what is the agrarian structure? That means there is a organization, how people or caste or the society is being organized according to. So in this chapter, we will be understanding the rural agrarian structure, how the society was organized in those places. So how it was organized? It was organized in as medium and large landowners. There were medium and large landowners. First, let us see the differences. There were medium and large landowners and agricultural laborers. Medium, large landowners, agricultural laborers, and the daily wage workers. So agricultural laborers were also termed as daily wage workers. Okay, and there were the tenants. So now we can see, we know that there were the medium and large landowners. There were the agricultural laborers who were also known as the daily wage workers, and the third term was the tenant, the one who takes land on lease or on rent. So who were the medium and large landowners? The medium and large landowners were the landowners who had a plentiful of land for cultivation. And the tenants, who were the tenants? The tenants were the people who would take these land on rent or on lease and do their cultivation as well. So the medium and large landowners, they had a very huge amount of profit. Why? Because they were holding the land, right? Those who have property, those who have land, they will have the wealth simultaneously. However, tenants, they also took the land on lease, right? They also took the land on rent. But however, since they had to pay a amount of their profit as rent or as money has to be given to the landowner, so their profit was a bit less than the landowners, the medium and large landowners. Now, who were the agricultural laborers? These were the people who did not have any land. They did not have any property. They did not have any land. Only they acquired was their skill to cultivate, to do the work, to do the labor, to do the agriculture. So these were the people who had nothing. So since they had no productive land as their resource, so they did not have the money, the wealth or anything. So this was the main agrarian structure that this chapter is talking about. So what we have seen? We have seen a very hierarchical based kind of society that was being present in our earlier times of rural areas. So there were medium and large landowners, there were the tenants and the agricultural laborers who were also termed as the daily wage workers. So this was the agrarian structure. Now what you have to understand here, student, is that how caste and class is interlinked, because these medium and large landowners, they belong to the higher caste. Okay, the Brahmins, the Kshatriya, the Vaishya, these were the people who were superior to the untouchables, the Dalits or the Shudras. So these people, they had, large and plentiful of land. So they were the landowners. They had, so these castes, the higher the caste, the higher the land holdings and the higher their class. Why? Because since they could accumulate a large amount of wealth through their profit, right? Because they had many profit by doing cultivation and all those kind of things. So they had the wealth, and since they had the wealth, they could migrate to urban areas, or their children could migrate to urban areas to gain education, to gain Western education, to gain job opportunities in foreign lands, in urban areas, and they could settle there as in a very luxurious lifestyle. So that is how caste and class is very much interlinked. Okay, in this present scenario also we can see the higher the caste, the higher their class. The lower the caste, the lower is the status. We don't see any Brahmin or any kind of Kshatriya people as a beggar in the streets. If you go in any kind of if you ask any beggar their title, you would see that it's a very long trajectory that they have, that their ancestors have suffered as well. So we can see that all the beggars, all the poor people in this country are from the lowest and the lowest of caste. So the interlinking of the class and caste, we can see it from this chapter. This is how caste and class is very interlinked. I hope you have understood this agrarian structure. So these are some of the examples of the dominant caste. Now there is another concept of dominant caste in this chapter, right? Dominant caste. So your homework will be, who gave the concept of dominant caste? Okay, this is a very important question, right? So dominant caste is a very important concept, and dominant caste did not belong from the upper caste. They did not belong from the upper caste. No. What was this dominant caste? They belong from the intermediate caste. Intermediate caste. That means, what this intermediate caste means? The middle sections. All the middle sections, all the people, all the castes that belong to the middle section of the caste system were the dominant caste. They were politically, they were socially, politically and economically or financially, they were very strong. So they were termed as the dominant caste. Okay, these are some of the dominant castes that I have given here. You can take a screenshot. Okay, let us now see what were the impacts of land reform. So now we will start a new topic, that is from the colonial period, right? It's the colonial period now. Now, since we have came to the colonial period, there were some land reforms that were taking place during the colonial period, and that these land reforms, they had a very large impact. So what were the impacts? What were the land reforms that this chapter is talking about? Let's see. When the British colonized India, in many areas, they ruled through these local zamindars. So the most important land reforms were that it included two kinds of systems, the zamindari system and the rayatwari system. Now, what is the zamindari system and what is the rayatwari system? So these concepts are very important. When British colonized India, in many areas, they ruled through these zamindars. They also granted property rights to the zamindars. Under the British, the zamindars were given more control over land than they had before. So what is the meaning of the zamindar? The zamindars were like the third, the middle party, the middleman between the Britishers and the common people. Okay, let's understand like this. The zamindars, they used to take the taxes from the local people and they would, give the taxes to the Britishers. Why the Britishers appointed the zamindars? The zamindars were appointed because they were the upper caste people. They had education, they could speak English, and the Britishers, they could not speak any other languages of the regions, right? India is a very, very diversified country. So we have a diverse kind of languages in India. So since Britishers, they could not speak any other kind of language and only they could speak English, so the zamindars, they appointed zamindars because the zamindars were from the upper caste, they had education, they could speak English, and they wanted some officials under the British people so that they could rule over the regions, those regions very, very smoothly, efficiently. For that reasons, they appointed the zamindars. So zamindars acted as the middle person, and for example, suppose the Britishers, they asked for 50 rupees. This is a hypothetical number, okay? So the Britishers asked for 50 rupees as tax, right? Since they have asked 50 rupees as tax from the common people, so what the zamindars did, the zamindars used to take 100 rupees from the local people. The 50 rupees, the extra 50 rupees, they would keep it inside their pockets and they would give the other 50 rupees to the Britishers. So that is how they have exploited the common people. The zamindars, the Britishers together, they exploited very much. The common people were being exploited very much by these zamindars and the British officials. So that is the system of zamindari system. Since the Britishers wanted to rule over certain regions very, very efficiently, for that reason, they appointed the zamindars who belong to the upper caste. They gave them the land rights. The Britishers, they gave zamindars the land rights. Why? Because they could speak English, they were educated, well educated. So in order to help them, in order to gain the help from the zamindars, they would give the land rights to the zamindars. So that is how the zamindari system was being, you know, uh, practiced in those areas. So that was the zamindari system. So in the colonial period, the land reform was one of the zamindars because the land rights have been given to the zamindars. I hope you have understood this system. Now let's go to the next system, that is the Rayatwari system. Now what is the Rayatwari system? The Rayatwari system is also a tax collecting system. This is also one of the land reforms that the Britishers brought about in the Indian society. But however, the Rayatwari system is less exploitative than the Zamindari system. Why? Because in the Rayatwari system, the Britishers and the cultivators, the land owning cultivators, the cultivators were they were the sole owners of the land. So the riot means the sole cultivators of their own land. So the Britishers and the riots, they had a one-to-one connection with each other. There were no middle person like in the zamindari system. The zamindars were the middle person. So that is why the exploitation was more. But however, in the riot system, there are no middle person, and the riot had to pay taxes to the Britishers directly. So since they had to give the taxes directly to the Britishers in certain areas, so that is why this system, the riot system, is a less exploitative than the zamindari system. So these two are the most important land reforms that the Britishers brought in about in the Indian society. So I hope you have understood the zamindari system and the Rayatwari system. So these two were the main, the land reforms of in the colonial time period. Now, what is the now after the colonial time period, we have entered into our independence era. India has gained independence, and after that also, India will have some kind of land reforms. So there are three land reforms, the major three land reforms that India brought in about after independence. So after India became independent, Nehru and his policy advisors focused on planned development. So since the British colonial era have looted India in a very, very exploitative way. So now the independent Indian government is focusing on planned development. So in independent India, there were important legislations that this Nehruvian government has incorporated. So what are the three most important legislation or plan of policy that has been, implemented in India's land reform scenario? The first one is the abolition of the zamindari system. So this was the first major important land reform that the Nehruvian government took, implemented in the Indian society. That is the abolition of the zamindari system. The second major land reform is this one. Tenancy Abolition and Regulation Act. Tenancy abolition, they wanted to abolish tenancy system. However, it was not, applicable in the scenario. So what they did, they regulated the the rent, the amount of rent that the people had to pay, they regulated that amount. So it was the Tenancy Abolition or the Regulation Act. The third number of land reform that the Britishers the Nehruvian government brought in was the Land Ceiling Act. So what is the Land Ceiling Act? It means there is an upper limit of how much amount of land a person or a family can acquire. For example, A, B, C, and D, these are the four family members. It's a family of four. Per person, they could acquire 1 bigha land. So in total, these four family members would have 4 bighas of land. 4 bighas. So this 4 bigha is the upper limit. They cannot hold any more land apart from this 4 bighas of land. So this is a fixed amount of upper limit has been fixed by the Nehruvian government as a part of the land reform system in India after independence. So this is the main meaning of this Land Ceiling Act. So I hope you have understood. However, this act or this policy had this law had major loopholes. Loopholes means it has a very very gap in its poor implementation. How? Let's see. How? What is the loophole? The loophole was landowners managed to divide the land among relatives and others, including servants, in so-called Benami transfer. So, Benami transfer is a very important term that was going on in that time period when Land Ceiling Act was on the go. What is this Benami transfer is that since I have told you with an example that there is a member of four members in a family, 4 bighas of land is fixed for that family, right? However, if they acquire a servant, they give that servant their name. After that, that servant would hold a land in his name, and that land would be a part of that family's property. So that is how Benami transfer was going on, and it was in a very very fast pace at that time period. So that is how Benami transfer were going on. So this was a major loophole in that Land Ceiling Act law. So this is also very, very important from your board's perspective because these are some of the criticisms of those, laws. And you can write all these kind of, sentences or paragraphs in your answers. So you might take a screenshot as well. Now let's go to the Green Revolution. So Now let's start another topic, that is green revolution. There is a first phase and a second phase of green revolution. Now what is green revolution? When independent India was very lacking in sufficient wheat grain production, food grain production, they had to incorporate a major change in its economic policy. So what was the major change in the economic policy? LPG policy, that is liberalization, privatization and globalization. When they adopted these policy, this new economic policy, at that time what happened? From outside, the major HYV seed that we call the high yielding variety seed, they were started being imported in India. As they were being started to import to India, our agrarian base was starting to be in a very productive. Our agrarian base started a very getting very productive in its food grain production. It was being sufficient in its food grain production. So this is what green revolution mainly means. So it was a government program of agricultural modernization. So our Indian government was trying to modernize our agrarian structure or our agrarian base. And how did they attempted to modernize our agrarian base? By importing high yielding variety seeds, or we can say hybrid seeds. So this was the major first phase of the green revolution. Okay. The Green Revolution of the 1960s and 1970s brought about significant changes in areas where it took place. Green Revolution programs were introduced only in areas that had assured irrigation because sufficient water was necessary for the new seeds and methods of cultivation. So only areas with sufficient water, good irrigation facilities were incorporated into the Green Revolution phase or Green Revolution process. So other areas were, sidelined. In many areas of India, they were sidelined, and only certain areas of our India was under the Green Revolution phase. So these areas were, simultaneously these areas were going, flourishing day by day, and the other areas they were, in a backward phase. They were going in a backward phase. So these were some of the social impacts, the negative social impacts of Green Revolution as well. How some areas were being sidelined, how some areas were being flourishing. So there was a very widening gap between the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer. So these were the regions which were targeted by the Green Revolution mainly, and it was Punjab, Western UP, coastal Andhra Pradesh, parts of Tamil Nadu, etc., etc. So this was the first phase of the Green Revolution. Now let's go to the second phase of the Green Revolution. We will see the social impact later. So the second phase of the Green Revolution, what was the second phase of the Green Revolution? It was the Green Revolution regions of India, the dry and semi-arid regions of India began following Green Revolution cultivation practices. So this was mainly the second phase of the Green Revolution, where the dry and semi-arid regions, the places which were earlier dry and arid regions, they were being incorporated into the Green Revolution era. How? Because now the irrigation facilities were being because of technological knowledge was very significant at this time period, and because of technological advancement which was going on in the society at that time period, so irrigation facilities were also being advanced, right? So due to those kind of facilities, the dry and semi-arid regions of India were also going through these kind of changes. So second phase of Green Revolution involved the dry and semi-arid regions were also being incorporated into the Green Revolution phase. So this was very important. Now let's see what were the impact. So like I have told you, there were negative impacts, there were positive impacts. So now let's see the negative social impacts. So let's see the negative social impacts of green revolution. Here the medium and large farmers were able to benefit from the new technology. So only the medium and large farmers were being able to gain from the or benefit from the new technology that was going on in that time period. However, the small and the marginal farmers, they were not being able to. Why? Because they did not have the money. Since they did not have the productive resource, which was the agricultural land in a rural area, since they did not have their agricultural land, so they did not have the money. They did not have the money or the wealth to invest in these machinery products, machinery objects like the tractors, the threshers, the harvesters, all these, or the seeds, the high yielding variety seeds, the pesticides, the fertilizers, these were very, very expensive. So they did not have the money to invest in those kind of things. And for that reason, the medium and large landowners or the farmers, they were only being able to benefit from this green revolution. So it was increasing the inequalities day by day, the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer. So this was the negative social impact. Also, rural and urban migration was also very, very significant process being taken place at that time. Why? Because the small and marginal farmers, they did not have the money, they did not have any productive land, agricultural land. So what they will do? They had to leave their agricultural activities in the village and they had to look for other job opportunities in the urban areas. So that is why rural and urban migration was also very, very frequent at that period of time. So students, I hope you have understood till here. So sorry for the delay, students. I hope you have understood till here. So let us see what were the transformation in rural society after independence. So this part is not very much required for your CVT perspective. You can just take a screenshot of this. So I will just briefly tell you about this slide. So what was the major transformation in rural society after independence? What kind of transformation? So like we have seen, there was migration, there was inequalities, right, in the previous slide. So as a result, what was happening? Two very famous concept came out. One is circulation of labor. So what is circulation of labor? Circulation of labor means now the labor, the agricultural laborers, the small and marginal farmers or the agricultural laborers, they have to circulate according to, according to according to work, season by season. To be very precise, season by season, they used to go to prosperous land that was under the Green Revolution, right? The Punjab area, the UP, Haryana, all these, Andhra Pradesh, all these kind of regions which were very prosperous at that time. The Green Revolution was from, flourishing at that time in those regions. So the people, the marginal farmers who belonged to very unprosperous land or region, they used to migrate to those prosperous land season by season in search of newer job opportunities in the agricultural field. So that is only termed as circulation of labor. So we can see here, and this circulation of labor is also known as another concept of put loose labor. Put loose labor. So this was another concept, and it was the circulation of labor, the migration that the migration that the laborers were doing, the migratory labors, they were also known as footloose labor because they used to go from one place to another in search of newer job opportunities, newer agricultural land, season to season. Okay, so this was the main objective of this slide. What is the main objective? The transformation that rural society was going through in independent India. Now, another topic of this chapter is globalization and liberalization in rural society. So, we know what is globalization, what is liberalization, right? So, what is the impact of globalization and liberalization in rural society? So, globalization, why we have, why agricultural, rural India, why rural India is under globalization, why Nehruvian era, when in the newly independent India, why globalization was playing a very big role in rural India? Because we have already known that India was insufficient in its food grain production. So in order to be very, sufficient in food grain production, we have acquired the globalization and the liberalization policies, economic policy. So as a result of this globalization and liberalization, rural India has went through two important major impact. So what are the two major impact? Let's see. There are two major impacts of globalization and liberalization in rural India. One is contract farming and the other is entry of MNC. So what is this contract farming? Contract means a lease between the farmer and a private company or a private individual. It's a contract, right? Contract farming. So in this contract farming system, the company identifies the crop to be grown. So whoever owns the company, whoever is the private owner of the company, they identify the crops to be grown. The farmer, they do not have any kind of choices of what crop has to be grown and what crop has to be sold in the market. Who identifies the crop? The company. The owner of the company identifies what crop has to be grown by the farmer. So that is why it's termed as contract farming. Provide the seeds and other inputs. The company owner, they provide the seeds. Everything has to be provided by the company. The seed, the inputs, the machineries, the training sessions, everything, as well as know-how and often also the working capital. And also they provide a working capital because the farmer, they don't have the sufficient amount of wealth that needs to be invested to do the farming, right? So they give everything to the farmer. They just have to, do the cultivation, do the harvesting and sell it to the company. So that is only the work that contract farmers do. In return, the farmer is assured of a market. So in return, they are assured that there will be a market, their production, their cultivation will be handed over to the market. As a result, the contract farming is very, very common in the production of specialized items such as cut flowers, fruits like grapes, figs, pomegranates, cotton, oilseeds, kiwi, dragon fruit, any kind of luxurious products. So as a result, what happened? As a result, we are on the verge of again facing food grain production's insufficiency. Why? Because maximum number of farmers today are going into these luxurious items, right? They are trying to, because these contract farmers, they tend to have more money than the regular traditional, farming, cultivation or any kind of farming. Because these are luxurious products, so maximum number of farmers are indulged in these kind of contract farming nowadays. So as a result, what is happening? The country is on the verge of again going into an insufficiency of food grain production. So this is a very, very major impact of contract farming that has been going on in the country as of now. So this is the main scenario of contract farming that has been seen after, after our globalization and liberalization era. Another important impact of globalization and liberalization is the entry of MNCs. MNCs means multinational corporations. So another and more widespread aspect of the globalization of agriculture is the entry of multinationals into this sector as sellers of agricultural inputs such as seeds, pesticides and fertilizers. So what are these multinational companies doing? They are providing seeds, or this seeds means the HYV seeds, the high yielding variety seeds in a very, very expensive rates. And in order to cultivate these high yielding variety seeds, the farmers need pesticides and fertilizers, which are also very, very expensive. So as a result, what is happening? Maximum number of farmers, the small farmers, they are taking loans from the money lenders or the third parties, and they are going debt into debt from decade to decade, generation to generation. They are going into debts. As a result, we can now see a lot of farmers suicide. Why? Because in order to compete in the market, in order to stand still in the market, they want to do better in the market. In order to do better in the market, they are investing their money, their wealth into these kind of seeds, into this kind of pesticides and fertilizers that the company is selling, and they are going into debt because they don't have the money, right? They don't have their own money to be invested. They take the loan, they invest the money, and as a result, either they have a profit, either they don't have the profit, and as a result, they are being used by these multinational companies, and as a result, we can see lots and lots of farmer suicide as of now. So this was the major impact of globalization and liberalization in rural India. I hope you have understood, students. So as a consequence, we can see farmers suicide. However, in this last page, we can see that nowadays, in the present scenario, the government is doing a lot for these farmers, for these small farmers, the marginal farmers. They are taking out many, many kinds of laws, plans, policies, so that they could help the farmers regain from those kind of debts. Because generation after generation, they are being trapped into these kind of debts. A vicious circle has been formed, right? So in order to take them out from this vicious circle, the government is playing its part, and acts or plans or policies like Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana, Bharat Uday Abhiyan, National Rural Urban Mission, These are some of the examples that the government is undertaking in order to make the farmer self-sufficient in itself, independent, right? So there are MNREGA as well. So these are some kind of plans and policies that are very, very important for the farmers to cooperate, to, compete in the market, to stand still in the market. So this was all about the chapter. So I hope you have understood, students, all the things. So today we are ending the session here. Tomorrow or in the next session, we will be doing some important question answers of this chapter. It will be in the part 2 video. Till then, take care. And also, if you want to connect with us through, offline, so you can contact to our phone number as well. I will give in the next part of the video. I will give our phone number, our address as well. You can connect to us offline as well as. So yes, till then, take care and bye bye.